Welcome to another episode of the Voices of the Learning Network podcast. Hello, listeners. This is your guest host today, Bill Banham, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I am joined today by one of the most influential thinkers in the L&D space, none other than Laura Overton, a researcher, pattern maker, and long-time observer of how L&D drives business value. Laura has spent more than 3 decades working alongside learning leaders through waves of disruption, from the rise of the internet to today's AI-driven transformations. As founder of Learning Changemakers and co-author of the L&D Leader, Laura brings a rare longitudinal perspective on what actually works and what needs to change. And in this conversation, listeners, we're going to explore a powerful idea, which is, what if everyone in L&D acted like a leader? So from confidence and capability to influence and impact, Laura is going to challenge us today to rethink the boundaries of the profession and what's possible when L&D pros step into more intentional leadership mindsets. Laura, I hope that was a nice introduction for you. How are you doing today?
I am so excited to be part of this conversation. It's just right in my heart at the moment. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm delighted that we got you on. Just before we hit record today, I did mention that I saw you at the Connect, not last year, not 2025, but 2024, and I thought you were awesome. So it's a pleasure to get a little bit of time with you today. Let's jump straight in by talking about the confidence gap in L&D. There seems to be a quiet confidence crisis in L&D. Many practitioners are doing great work, but don't necessarily see themselves as leaders. Maybe you'll disagree with this. From your perspective, does that actually matter, and what shifts when they start to think of themselves maybe in a different capacity?
I think it's really powerful to be in our industry and whatever part we're playing. Instructional designer, leading a team, facilitator, coach, trainer, technical guru. We all have a real desire, I find, in the industry to really make a difference in people's lives. I think that's what pulls us together. We're very curious about that. And, I think one of our confidence gaps comes when other people don't understand what it is that we're doing. So I think our curiosity about how we can become more impactful, how we can become more influential in every single conversation that we have, I think is part of us becoming leaders. I love the Dolly Parton quote she said once, if you can allow people to be inspired to be more, to learn more, to create more, then you are a leader. And that to me really just embraced the whole process of what we can become as learning and development professionals, because we want to be inspirational. We want to make a difference in people's lives. And it's a different definition of leading, but I think it's a really powerful way to unleash our curiosity of how we can help others do that more.
When I was last in Nashville, I almost bought a ticket to Dollywood. And then I ended up doing more honky tonk instead, but that's on the list, that's for sure. Let's talk about patterns from high performing L&D teams. So you've spent 20 plus years studying what separates high performing L&D teams from the rest. What's one finding that genuinely surprised you and that you feel most practitioners still perhaps haven't fully clocked?
What surprises me is that there have been so many models of learning, so many opportunities of technology, so many different ways in which we can really shift how we support and enable other people to become their better selves. I think what surprises me is how little we act on what we know. And with the high-performing teams, what I found is that typically we're only about 10, 20% in any sample in any one year. They're proactive. They see themselves as enablers of learning rather than producers of programs. They are working with others in the organization rather than working for others in the organization. And they are thinking of different ways to ensure that people are equipped and ready. And I use that very with a lot of intent, is that we talk a lot about performance, we talk a lot about impact, we talk a lot about value. But actually, I believe that our role and function is to ensure that other people are equipped and ready, equipped to perform today, but also ready to be able to adapt tomorrow. And I think for me, the high performing teams understood that. They were perhaps more likely to be experimenting. They were perhaps more likely to be exploring. They were more likely to try different things in order to pursue their desire to enable people to be equipped and ready, rather than protect the way that they have done things in the past. Does that surprise me? I've looked at that data for so long. That does not surprise me. I see it everywhere. I see it in tiny projects. I see it in the awards. I see it with organizations where their companies don't get that, but the learning professionals do get that. And I see that kind of change maker attitude, that leadership attitude in the small things as well as the big things. And I see them making a difference. And so I get this joyful surprise every time that I see these principles in action. And that I love about our industry.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I mentioned to you before we hit record today that straight before this interview, I was recording with Perry Timms. I'm sure lots of listeners will be familiar with Perry Timms, and he's all about the polymorphic organization at the moment. And part of that, of course, is this idea that a learning experience should be flexible, it should be fluid, because it's actually more about the results. It's not necessarily about how you get there. From what you just said a moment ago, sounds like you agree with that?
Absolutely. Organizations are complex. They are messy. They are unpredictable. I think the best that we can do with any of our initiatives, and it's even more so today, Bill, in the past, we could just about create a straight line through. We could just about to say, if we do this, and we do it well, and we engage our stakeholders, and we market, and we tick all the boxes, then we are likely to get a result. Whereas today, I think we're more aware of the fact that things are moving so rapidly. To Perry's point, they're much more fluid, our organizations that we're working in. And so I think that this is a really important aspect of our work. It's not that we create something that's shapeless, that goes as, it's not that we create something that is shapeless and just moves with the flow. But we can have a lot of intent. We can be deliberate in our environments that we're working in, but we need to be able to be flexible. We need to be able to shift our course. And one of the things that I've been really thinking about recently is our ability to navigate that fluid environment. In fact, I use the metaphor of like, instead of working on the shore where it's safe, dabbling in the sides of the sea, our world of work now is really out in unknown territory. It's in unknown oceans where there aren't clear pathways, where we have to learn to navigate in order to drive business impact. Then that allows us to read the environment a lot more clearly and adapt our course when we need to be able to do that. So yeah, I think I would be right up there, that we are navigating that very fluid environment, and we're needing to realize that now.
When you go into a room with a bunch of leaders and you're trying to get them on board for a new learning program, say, or actually you're leading a course with a bunch of learners, and you see some folks who do not look particularly engaged. Maybe it's a Monday morning, maybe they've not had enough coffee. I don't know what it looks like. But you're thinking to yourself, okay, we've got to get the energy up here. We've got to get people buying into what I'm about to share with them. Anything you'd like to share there in terms of some good techniques to make that happen?
Well, I have to say that I am not a trainer. And I've seen amazing people facilitate in incredibly powerful ways. And I use a lot of facilitation techniques myself. And I love liberating structures and things like that, where you're bringing surprise, you're bringing energy. But you know what? I would come back to, where are you trying to lead these people, and why are they in the room in the first place? And to be honest, if I wasn't confident that this was something that was relevant to them, that was appropriate for helping them do their job now or be ready for a job in the future, I might even call that and say, why are we all here? Let's start a different conversation. Let's start a new conversation, because actually that's what leadership is about, is making sure we're doing the right things with the right people at the right time, and having the sense to be able to tell the difference. Many of us are given programs to deliver where we haven't done that tuning in process. We haven't really tuned into what the organizations were interested in. We're not tuning into what the individual's interested in. We're not tuning into the environment in which they're working. This is a really powerful navigation technique, this concept of tuning in. And if we hadn't had a chance to do it before they were in the room, I would do it right there and then. Put them at the center of attention. What's important to you right now? And how can we make sure that the time we have together really delivers against what you need?
And by doing that, are you more likely to up those percentages? I think you mentioned 20% of people are proactive in one of your previous answers. By taking those small steps, what would one expect to see as a result, in terms of engagement in the room?
I think when we're tuning in, what we're actually able to see is what works and what doesn't, and what we've prepared may not be ready to work. And it's the same whether people are in the room or whether we have spent months and months implementing learning management systems and libraries full of what we think is really useful stuff. If we haven't spent time with our people in their context, then it's going to be very difficult for them to really understand what it is that we're doing. And we're not going to be able to communicate in their language. We're not going to be able to connect to their energy. We're not going to be able to raise their energy. We're just adding potentially to their confusion and to their frustration in their world of work. So, I think it's really powerful for us to really spend time thinking about what do these people need and how can we be our best selves and turn up and deliver and support them in their journey rather than them joining us on our journey.
Okay, I think another kind of related question for you. So in terms of redefining the boundaries of L&D, you often talk about questioning the boundaries of the profession, not just what the function does, but what it could become. What are some of the most limiting assumptions you still see in the profession today?
The sense that we're producers of programs, producers of contents, how we see ourselves. I think how we see our value is really important as well. And I think, I talk a lot about the L&D value spectrum, and I'm more than happy to share the link to that in the show notes with your listeners. But the L&D value spectrum is how we talk about our value. Do we talk about it in context of how other people see us? Are they engaged? Are they completing? Are they recommending? Are they promoting? Is there a good NPS score? It's all about do people love me, and will they recommend me? And I think when we're only facing those value metrics, that can be incredibly limiting. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum are the things that are important to the business, the things that are important to individuals in their business, their career progression, the next job role that they need to be prepared for, the new rollout of a system that they need to get their heads around, the new ability to be on a team when they've only been part of a team. The things that are important to the business and the behaviors that look right for the business. When we turn around, instead of looking at our value, we look at that value in concept of what it means to other people. That is a liberating factor rather than a limiting factor, because suddenly we're on a journey with people rather than we're trying to force them on our journey. So I think how we see our value, how we see what we do as a producer, and also can be limiting factors, but also how other people see us as well. And I think one of the challenges is that, David Wilson talked 20 years ago, this was, about this concept of this conspiracy of convenience. And what that was about was that when someone says, oh, I see you do great courses, I'd like one, or a great game, or a great piece of e-learning, or a great podcast, or whatever it is, give me one of those. We're often so happy that someone wants something that we love to do for them that we will give that to them. And there's this kind of sense of convenience where we were responding in the right way. But I think we need to break that, because that, even how other people see us, can limit our potential as really being able to lead learning in our organization, because they can't see any other way for doing it, and we can't see how to break that environment. So there's a limiting factor on how other people see us, how we see our value, and how we see what we do.
Laura, we are flying through these questions. I've only got a couple more for you for today, but I'm sure I'll be badgering you to do more with me in the future. Penultimate question. In terms of learning through disruption, that's a word that I use a lot. You've worked through multiple waves of disruption: economic shifts, digital transformation, COVID. Currently, we're living through all the changes we're seeing on the back of AI and automation. There's also lots of other macro, socio-economic and political things going on in the world right now that maybe gets us down. What patterns are you seeing repeat themselves, and what's genuinely different at the moment?
I think the patterns that I see repeating ourselves in our learning and development profession is our hunger for something new to be able to solve our problems. There is a repeat pattern that comes through, particularly when it comes down to technology. We were hoping that the internet would allow us to get more courses to more people for less money. We were hoping that the social media will help us to deliver more connection with more people for less money. We're hoping that mobile allows us to deliver more learning on the go for less money. It's those are the sorts of patterns that I'm seeing repeated. And when COVID came, I had my head in my hands, Bill, because I thought to myself, I think this is going to be another 9/11 situation. In 9/11, everyone had to stop traveling. And so everyone moved into online learning, particularly in the States. But what happened was that it was so bad that, that basically everyone was so relieved and they could go back into the classroom that they did that. And nothing was, we didn't take advantage of the disruption of 9/11. And when COVID came, I thought, this is another opportunity where we can actually take advantage of it. We can do something well. We can be more personal. We can be connected. We can show how online can be creating a social environment. It can create communities. And in fact, I was working with Michelle Lockers and Shannon Tipton, and we had this global community working together, learning together how we could emerge stronger. But what happened, the pattern repeated. Everyone said, that was a terrible experience, really bad e-learning, really bad facilitation online. And we went back into the situations that we know. So these are the sorts of patterns that concern me, that I can see happening. Those that are breaking through that are taking advantage of disruption. That, they are actually exploring how a disrupted work environment allows them to experiment more, to try more, to explore more, to do things differently, because they've suddenly got a little window of permission to see if they can actually do things better. Rather than hope that they can, I call it, it's almost like if a massive storm comes along, there are some of us who just put up our umbrellas, we hunker down, and we bend down underneath that weather and just hope it goes away. And when it does, we breathe a sigh of relief. But there are others of us who kind of put up that wind farm, sort of like, the windmill, and say, I'm going to capture this energy. I'm going to see where it takes me, what new places it can take me. And I think that's the exciting thing. There are those of us who can take advantage of disruption, and those of us that do can really make a difference. And it's another example of how we can lead, and how disruption gives an opportunity to try something new, to explore something, and to be bold.
Okay, I think we found the title for this particular episode. Be a windmill, listeners. Be a windmill. There we go. Before we wrap up for today, Laura, how can folks connect with you? Is that LinkedIn? Do you want to share your email address? Are you super cool on all over TikTok and places? What's coming up for you in terms of events where people can see you? And of course, can Learning Network members catch up with you at Connect later this year?
I'm always on LinkedIn, love to be found there. My website is learningchangemakers.com. I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to see people absolutely at Connect. And, I just love being part of the Learning Network community, and also at the awards as well, being involved with the awards there, which I know is such a vital part of the network's, work. So yeah, lots of different places. But if you don't see me, find me, on LinkedIn or on my website.
Excellent. That just leaves me to say for today, and again, I'm sure I'll be chasing you soon to have more conversations, but just for today, Laura Overton, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.